Okay. Well, thank you very much, Caitlin and Kate. I appreciate you having me again, doing another presentation, this one on time management. Yeah, and I hope this is going to be a helpful presentation. I think in time management, one of the things we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about some do's, don'ts, and things that we can do to kind of maximize time. But I think that one of the big themes I want to get across when we do this presentation is to talk about what really is time management, and does time management really exist? And so what we're going to do is going to maybe ask that question. I'm going to get the share screen going and kind of move through a couple of the first few slides. I'm hoping it's showing up on your screen. Is it showing up on your screen? Yes? Yeah, okay. Good, because I don't see it in front of me. So the question I want to first propose is, can we really manage time? I think that's a really interesting question, because I think we have this kind of built-in belief that if I do this and do this and do this, I will find more time in my day. But the reality of time is time just exists. I mean, each second's going by, each minute's going by, each hour's kind of going by. So we really can't manipulate that. It's just happening. And so we can do things, I think, and hopefully will be the heart of this kind of conversation, is we can do things within that context of something we really can't control, but we can kind of maximize how we're experiencing, how we're feeling, and how we can kind of re-energize ourselves for times when we are kind of overwhelmed, to say, I can have things that kind of give me the strength to kind of move through. So the first thing I'm going to do is just kind of start off from the video, just to kind of get some thoughts in your head and to think about a few things as we kind of start exploring time management.
Added up, we will finally get to everything we want to do. But after studying how successful people spend their time and looking at their schedules hour by hour, I think this idea has it completely backward. We don't build the lives we want by saving time. We build the lives we want, and then time saves itself. Here's what I mean. I recently did a time diary project looking at 1,001 days in the lives of extremely busy women. They had demanding jobs, sometimes their own businesses, kids to care for, maybe parents to care for, community commitments. Busy, busy people. I had them keep track of their time for a week so I could add up how much they worked and slept, and I interviewed them about their strategies for my book. One of the women whose time logs I studied, she goes out for a Wednesday night for something. She comes home to find that her water heater has broken, and there is now water all over her basement. If you've ever had anything like this happen to you, you know it is a hugely damaging, frightening, sopping mess. So she's dealing with the immediate aftermath that night. Next day, she's got plumbers coming in. Day after that, professional cleaning crew dealing with the ruined carpet. All this is being recorded on her time log. Winds up taking 7 hours of her week. 7 hours. That's like finding an extra hour in the day. But I'm sure if you had asked her at the start of the week, could you find 7 hours to train for a triathlon? Could you find 7 hours to mentor 7 worthy people? I'm sure she would have said what most of us would have said, which is no. Can't you see how busy I am? Yet when she had to find 7 hours because there is water all over her basement, she found 7 hours. And what this shows us is that time is highly elastic. We cannot make more time, but time will stretch to accommodate what we choose to put into it. And so the key to time management is treating our priorities as the equivalent of that broken water heater.
And so that's kind of where I think a starting point with this stuff is, if we want to have more successful time management, we really got to figure out what is the priority. I mean, we kind of let ourselves get overwhelmed and we lose time, for lack of a better way of saying it, because we may not prioritize or get overwhelmed or not have good boundaries about what we're doing. And I think if we sit down and say, you know what, I need to prioritize certain things, we can then start having better time management. And the thing that we think we first need to prioritize is personal wellness objectives. I put on the screen here, we have things like that just need to be part of our daily schedule that sometimes we don't put in there, or we rush in there, that are essentials for our quality of living, like eating and sleeping and finding time to exercise or some sort of movement, enjoying the things that we care about, the hobbies, or just being able to relax and giving ourselves time to unwind, or spending time with the family and friends. I mean, these are things that should be essentially built in every day. at some point within that kind of 24-hour period that we're given. And if we're not putting them in there, or if we let them lose track, or we rush out the door without eating, or skip a lunch, we are hurting ourselves and actually causing us probably to have worse time management, because we'll be unwell, we'll be uncomfortable, we'll be cranky, and then we'll be facing challenges and stressors that we're not mentally or physically in a good spot to deal with. And so when we talk about time management, I think the first thing we have to do is prioritize self, prioritize our own wellness, and prioritize the essentials that make us have quality existence on this planet. And so when we talk about these like kind of emotional physician time management tools, it's really important to be committed to yourself. I mean, I think that's something we tell patients all the time is take care of yourself, prioritize yourself, do these things. If it's important to you, you'll find time to do. And we have to kind of throw that stuff back at ourselves. We have to be able to say, these are important. I have an important job, I have important responsibilities, but these things are essential for quality of living. And if I don't put those in there, I'm going to kind of suffer for that. And not only will I suffer, but it can also impact the patient care. Don't sacrifice your wellness. I think sometimes it's easy for us. We get in this caretaking job. We help people. The helping profession, and it's easy for us to become self-sacrificers to kind of say, I got to put this need on this, my responsibility. And it's true. We do have things, and we do at times have to kind of go the extra yard to kind of make sure we can kind of help people. But at this point of not sacrificing our own wellness, it's that whole airplane analogy that I think most of us are worried about. If the masks fall down, you got to put your mask on first before you put on your kid's mask, because if you're not conscious, you aren't able to help your child. And that's kind of the things when we talk about this, our helping profession is, if I'm not well, if I'm distressed, if I'm overwhelmed, if I'm distracted, if I'm feeling I'm not as fully capable of being the person that I want to be to care for the people I'm in charge of. And I always find this, this other analogy interesting too, is when I worked in treatment center a long time, is that when patients are getting resistant to taking the guidance, taking the suggestion, taking help, is we sit there and say, well, what would you ask your kid to do in this situation? Or what would you ask your loved one if they got this recommendation? Would you say, oh, don't follow that professional guidance, don't follow that professional help, just do what you want to do? Or would you encourage them to take that guidance and take that help? And I think that's the thing is, what would we ask the people we care about to do? Would we tell them to sacrifice their wellness? Would we tell them to skip, meals and sleep and rest and overwhelm and not set good boundaries and never say no to anybody and let let things just run over me? We would say no to that. We would not want that to happen. And when sometimes we have to kind of sit there and challenge ourselves so we don't allow that to happen to ourselves. Again, these are about the emotional things that we got to consider, the self-prioritizing things that for our own care, wellness, that we need to focus on if we're going to have good time management. We'll talk about the more logical or practical things in the actual practice, world that we work in. But these are things that are just important for ourselves first that have to be in place. Things that are also important is kind of emotional time management stuff. Some tips to kind of think of is, fight the urge to procrastinate. I mean, it's so simple. I think we get so overwhelmed by everything that we're doing at work and stuff like that. I mean, I can be in that place too. I have a newborn son, trying to manage that. I got a couple other kids I'm trying that are older, that are got their soccer and gymnastics and all this stuff. And I got to go to work and I got to do this. I've been promoted into a different position. I got all these stressors. And I can just, when I get home, if there's any minute, instead of saying, no, I got to put things that are important. Or I can put stuff off and say, I'll just get to that later, and say, no, if I'm going to be fulfilled, I got to be able to, do these things. And challenge defenses against change. A lot of times the reason why we get procrastination is because we find excuses not to do something. And I think it's important to say to ourselves and challenge ourselves, or allow somebody else to challenge us, to say, no, don't fall into that. Don't let your defenses take over and give you an excuse not to do a new thing, new challenge. And be patient with yourself. That's obviously important and hard to do, because if we are going to implement new time management strategies, or we're going to try things to better ourselves, we're going to have to be patient with the change. So I put it up here, this visualization to kind of look on the slideshow. Is just kind of, this is what your week looks like. And that's 12 a.m. Sunday night to 11 p.m. Sunday evening, and this is the time. These are the hours that are there. And I think when it's important, and this is what I've worked with clients and patients before, is to look at this week and visualize it, or take a pen and paper. And I would encourage people to do that. And it's like, if I'm struggling, and if I'm stressed, and I'm overwhelmed, and I feel like there's not enough time in my day, what does it look like? What would it visually look like that my week would be maximized? How does that look? And write it out. Look what you would want it to look like. It's kind of the miracle question. There's a philosophy of counseling called solution-focused counseling, where they have this thing where they ask you the miracle question: what would my ideal, answer to this problem be? And once you present what that answer is, and you're like, well, how do we get there? And I would say that with time management. Here it is. What would your ideal week look like? Where would the time for yourself be? Where would the time, if you had in an ideal world, be able to make time to eat, or make time to sleep, or make time to relax? What is the time for work? What would be the good boundaries around work? What would the time that I would want to be there? What's the time I want to leave? When was the time I need to step back or take a break from work? How would that look? And then once it's there and you have it kind of written down, how do I start working around that and finding myself a way to put myself into that? Now, there's obviously going to be obstacles to that. I mean, just because I have a schedule doesn't mean everybody else is going to be sticking to it. But it gives you something to kind of ground yourself, to kind of hold yourself accountable to. And even when there's things that kind of pull you off track, how do I pull myself back on track? Or if I look at things that pulled me off track, it's a great time to say, there goes, well, what did I not see that now I have to kind of include or add into my schedule to make it more effective? Now that's something I just couldn't predict, or if there's a new challenge presented to you, or new expectation or obligation at work. How would I fit this in here to make it to fit into what my ideal? I want to work. I want to do my thing. I have my things I'm accountable for. But how would it look, and how would I maximize that? How would I maximize and feel most productive in doing it? And so that's one strategy to look at when you're trying to figure out how to maximize time management, is to visualize it, and then try to strive and work through goals and challenge yourself on that. I think it's best done when you're kind of having other people also kind of work with you and kind of saying, where was that obstacle? Why didn't you stick to that? Is that something you can change? Is that something you can't change? If it is something you can change, what are the internal obstacles you had for not doing that, or struggling to do that? And so we'll kind of move on to more of the kind of the logical physician time management dues. So this is kind of, there's probably an article, there is an article linked on to the end of this presentation. There's actually a couple of them that just talked about the physician time management and some of the challenges. So one of the things I kind of pulled out of that, the articles, was some of the kind of tangible dues when it comes to time management. Like these are things that we just kind of know, like we logically understand, but sometimes we forget or push to the side or don't stick with. Things like establishing goals, prioritizing your workday. Like, what is something that I need to get done? What is stuff that I can be moved to another time or another place? And where can I find that? If I'm doing a schedule, where can I find time to put that into the schedule? One of the biggest challenges I get told all the time, and I work with a lot of physicians, I get a lot of referrals sent my way, is the world of electronic medical records, and how that's the thing that's designed to save time, but it's costing me a bunch of time. It's never working. It's longer. It's more redundant. There's all those things that I kind of hear. The reality of it is it's not going away. So how do I take advantage of the technology, and how do I find the ways around it? And have I taken the time to really kind of maximize the tool? We just switched to an electronic medical record system here, and initially it seemed overwhelming, because everything's different. It's not how we were doing it. You're so used for the last few years doing it one way, and then to try all of a sudden do it a different way, it just seems like how is this going to be efficient? But we're 6 months into it, 7 months into it, and there's been so many things that have made it so much manageable and much easier to do, just by being willing to explore and invest and dive into it. Which again, it's like, well, I don't have time. I got to do other things. That's why we create schedules and stuff like that to say, where could I sneak this? Where would I be able to put this in there to kind of learn how to maximize that? And develop self-awareness. I think that's the key to a lot of time management. Is I don't know, when I talk about time being like something we can't really do anything with, it's funny how, although it's not tangible, we have a lot of terms as if it is, like we lost time. And I think that happens with people when we don't have good self-awareness. We can lose time. We can not see ourselves, oh, I'm not going to let myself be, beyond this, boundary. I have to, these other things I need to do to take care of myself. And I let that boundary kind of go. I lost track. Oh, I thought I was going to be gone at 5, and here it is 6, here it is 7. What happened here? And how do I come back and become aware of, where did I miss that? Where did I miss the opportunity? Or what did I not prioritize right to make it so I could actually get to the thing I needed to do? And those are some of the strategies that I think when you make a schedule and you can look at it, can really pull apart and say, where are those little gaps? Where are those little holes? Again, some other do's when we talk about the physician world and kind of logical stuff that we know, but we forget, is like delegate when possible. That's been a real challenge for me. I can tell you that as I kind of moved up into a different position as a clinical director and having a couple of people I'm kind of supervising over, is I had trouble not wanting to be the case manager and the clients I had, and learning how to let them go to the new case manager, not delegating some of the responsibilities, not taking on all the phone calls or all the kind of the follow-ups and stuff like that, and saying, you know what, my job is to make sure this person is doing it, so it gives me time to do these other things that I've been asked to do. And when I don't do that, it feels like I'm overwhelming myself, and part of it's not because the help is not there, it's because I'm not asking for the help, or I'm trying to take control of things that I need to learn how to let go. And that can be challenging, because learning to let go is not something that's just taught, it's done. We all know what it means, we all have to do it, but it's experiencing learning how to be uncomfortable with letting go of control. Somebody told me once about counseling and just change in general. It's all about learning how to become comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I think if we can set that as kind of a tone, it's like, I'm going to make changes, they're going to feel uncomfortable, but that's okay, that's how I know I'm growing. Then we kind of see where the progress is happening. Learning to say no. If you're running late or having delays, let people know. Boy, that makes things a lot better on everybody, because it allows you to be okay. I've let somebody know that it'll be a little late at this, and so that person's not going to be as angsty or tense about the situation if they're running late. You'll know you've let them share. You've been, you've kind of been accountable to the situation, which kind of a lot of times makes us feel better. Like letting people know that I'm not on time is okay, because it makes them aware, and it tells them, hey, your time is valuable too. And so we all have this kind of mutual respect, and we feel more connected that way. And then discuss, the challenge of it is sometimes when we're working, especially in a family, family physicians, is, the time with patients, and some patients wanting a certain amount of time or asking a lot of things, is being able to set those clear expectations on kind of the, when you're meeting and developing a relationship and rapport with somebody, is kind of saying, this is what I can do, this is where the thing is, this is where, some of my limits are to what I can help or where I'll be available to help. It's always been telling people, I know this as a counselor, it's like, I'm here to help, I want to help you, but there are certain, boundaries around that where I won't be available, but there are other tools that you can use to have help until I can get back to being able to be, part of the support in your situation. And being able to let people know that up front. Because sometimes if people don't hear that, they just take that as kind of an invitation, is that I'm available, you're available all the time, and why aren't you there? And it's like, no, I got to be able to be clear about that, those kind of boundaries. Here again, here's some of the don'ts, right? Don't agree to do whatever you're asked to do. Some of us that, I can be that kind of person that just says, it's, you ask me, I don't like to ask for help. I don't like to say no. I don't want to, I have my own kind of ego or self insecurities or whatever it might be, and be able to say sometimes it's like, you know what, this is something I can't do, or maybe it's not in the ballpark, or I know somebody that would be better at doing this thing. And being able to learn how to delegate that kind of stuff. Obviously, stuff we know, not using our time productively when, before we're seeing patients, or kind of those time wasters that we have. I think it's hard because I think we need moments to decompress in a work environment. But the same token is, I think sometimes if we ask ourselves, how much have I do things that aren't really part of decompressing. They're just kind of things that kind of throw me off track or distracting me, or they weren't decompressing me in the place that it was re-energizing me. If I kind of eliminated some of that, maybe that would give me a little bit, a few more moments that I didn't have before. And make sure you don't get in a situation where you have no outside life. I mean, that's the big thing. It kind of goes back to the beginning of this presentation, is that the point of time management is to maximize your work situation, but it's also to maximize your living situation, your life, your personal life. If that is doing well and it feels satisfactory, coming to work and the stressors that are there seem much more manageable, and I'm much more motivated to work things in there and to work maybe even harder into those things because I'm feeling satisfied. So while we can talk about these tips to kind of keep your time management at work, it's really about what's happening personally, so I can make my best time where I'm expected to be here better. Just kind of a couple kind of why is the importance of time management, right? It's better patient care, better attitude towards work, better relationship with peers, reduction of stress and burnout, and it gives you more personal time. I think people, like sometimes if we don't realize, if I take the time, put some work into doing something, strategize and look at this stuff, it actually creates more time. Which it seems like, it would take more time because I'm having to do something I wasn't doing before, but it actually is going to open up avenues that you didn't know were there. And the ultimate goal of this is not only for you to feel better, but for your patients to feel better. I mean, it all comes down to, I think this whole series is about how can we do things for ourselves that will ultimately reflect into the care we give people. And not only the care we give people, but our attitude towards work and our relationship with our coworkers, or the system that we're working for, or some of the things that drive us crazy, not to be so frustrated, angry, stressed about them. And reduce stress and burnout, which is something that I am endlessly hearing and learning more about as we kind of move along in this field that I've gotten into the last 3 years, which is this huge stress and burnout, and how much is thrown at people, and how much people are considering not wanting to continue to be a physician because of some of the demands. And part of it is, how do we find strategies to help people not feel that way? Again, more personally stuff, you'll feel healthier, you better relationship with your loved ones, be more relaxed, more serene, less tired, and more refreshed for work. I mean, this is why time management is so valuable. I can tell you, I've working in the field, helping people for a long time, doing these kind of strategies, putting things together, putting a schedule, and learning how to prioritize and exploring my week. People, within a month are starting to feel better and feel more well than they have in a long time. And all it was making a few adjustments, or just visualizing and becoming more in tune with how they were living, and not just slapping stuff on a phone and putting your little, something in this calendar, but actually examining, how am I using my time? Again, I'm going to just kind of, the stuff that I think most people know, right? Daily planners, they can help. I think that's why I put the calendar up there, but I was trying to put the week calendar up there to kind of explore everything outside of their work, not just your work calendar, but this life calendar. Commit to boundaries, learning how those skills, if you're struggling with committing boundaries, you're struggling with saying no, if you're struggling with this kind of self-accountability or self-awareness, that's why coaching exists, that's why counseling exists. We do have resources and referrals for people that are looking for counseling or coaching, physician-specific coaching. That can be very helpful, especially when you're getting stressed and you don't know how to, you feel like there isn't enough time in the day, and at the end of the day, you're like, I'm doing nothing for myself, I'm always at work, and I don't know what to do. We have ways and tools that are available to develop relationships that can help. I mean, we as an entity do, but we also have resources and referrals outside of ourselves. Are important to look for internal solutions, not external solutions. Unfortunately, we can't expect other things to change, but we can do something about our own personal change. I mean, it's this. It's interesting. I mean, most people, when they come in like initial sessions and they talk about stuff, they're always this kind of laundry list of things that, if all this stuff would go away, then I would be better. And part of the problem is a lot of stuff they described is not going to go away. So what can I do to be better with everything that's around me? And then, of course, we talked about this earlier, learning how to do some brief mindfulness meditation stuff within your workday to kind of be able to relax and regroup, especially if you're trying to kind of like get a schedule, kind of get a time management plan in place, and it's struggling and it's hard and you're learning some of these pitfalls that you didn't know were there. Like, how do I debrief? How do I decompress? How do I get myself back on track? Or if this isn't, or I'm not having struggling getting back on track, how do I find ways to say it's okay? We can revisit, we can relook at this. You know, we're not expecting anybody just to like, here's this plan and it works. I've worked in facilities long enough to know that when we give people these plans and they do schedules to try to learn how to be more accountable for themselves, they struggle all the time. That's okay. That gives them stuff to work on, and that's about growth. You know, I think one of the challenges I have when I work with a lot of professionals, especially physicians, is there's an expectation of perfection, and I am not a believer in perfection. I'm a believer that we have to kind of bump our head a few times to learn how to grow. That's just how it is. And then just a couple more things before we kind of move to the question and answer. So I could just show one more little 2-minute video talking about this kind of concept again, and just trying to revisualize and rethink time management before I kind of throw out a question for a little bit of discussion and kind of go from there.
How is it that we have more tips and tricks, tools and technology, calendars and checklists than ever before, and yet we still always seem to be behind? How is it that we work longer hours? We're moving faster than we've ever moved in history, and yet we never seem to be caught up? How is it that we know more about time management today, and yet stress is at an all-time high? The reason why is because everything you know about time management is wrong. I first started to realize this a couple years ago. It was early on a Saturday morning. I was at my business partner's house, and I was picking him up for a very important international leader planning retreat. And he has this 2-year-old baby girl named Haven. And Haven is the sweetest little thing you can imagine. She has curly brown hair and these sweet, soft brown eyes. And we live in Nashville, so she has a little southern accent that's developing. And as I'm picking up Dustin and we're about to leave, Haven comes sprinting down the hallway. And she leaps and she latches on to Dustin's leg. And she says, "Daddy, where are you going?" And he looks down at her and he says, "Oh, I'm sorry, baby Haven. Daddy actually has to go to work today." And she looks up at him and her eyes well up with tears. And she says, "No, Daddy. Please, no work today. No work, Daddy." And in that moment, I realized 2 things. The first is that I myself am not ready to have kids just yet. The second is that even though everything that you've ever heard about time management is all logical, tips and tricks, tools and technology, calendars and checklists, it's apps, it's all logic. What I realized in that moment from a 2-year-old is that today time management is no longer just logical. Today, time management is emotional. And how our feelings of guilt and fear and worry and anxiety and frustration, those things dictate how we choose to spend our time as much as anything that's in our calendar or on our to-do list. In fact, there is no such thing as time management. You can't manage time. Time continues on whether we like it or not. So there is no such thing as time management. Really, there is only self-management.
So I think that's kind of one of the things, just kind of give a different perspective on thinking about time management. I think we focus a lot on the logical, the tangible stuff, and don't always explore the kind of emotional realm of time management, which I think is really what dictates why we make the choices and allow ourselves to do things, and the thing that maybe we have to kind of examine and view more of if we're going to be successful in time management. And that's kind of why I put on that initial part of that strategy of looking at your week. And not because I want to put it in there and just I'm going to execute it. It's because it gives you a chance to say, look at this, and this is what I would hope it looked like, and here's where it's working, and explore, and why do I struggle with that, and what's going on here, and what is the emotions that feed me to say that, hey, I wanted to do this, but I didn't do this, and I didn't allow myself to do that, and learn more about like self and self-awareness. And I think that will help maximize that time management. I have one last little question, kind of on there before I kind of, hopefully it will kind of generate into the discussion. It says, what would you do with $86,400 if you could not put it in a bank or you lost what you did not use? And so part of that's like, is kind of this question is, well, what would I do with that if I couldn't save it, and if I didn't use it, I lost it, you know, and part of it is we can maybe kind of just contemplate that a little bit. I want to give it's a little bit longer than I thought I would go with the presentation, but that kind of idea about it is, this is your day. That's how many seconds are in a day, is 86,400 seconds. And what do I do with that? I mean, they're mine. I get them, but I can't save them, you know, and if I don't use them, I lose them. So what do we hope to accomplish with that time that we're given? So it looks like we're going to kind of open up for discussion. There's some resources on the thing, on the sheet. Maybe I'll keep that up while I think you can see my face on the little screen. We can talk about anything that pops up. Or if you guys want to share with amongst yourselves about any time management kind of tips or ideas that you've had.
Hi, Nelson. Thanks so much for that.
Sure.
I'd really be interested in hearing what some of our physicians would say about using their 86,400 seconds, or
Sure.
how would they use that money, equating that. That sounds great. So if anybody has some good ideas, we'd love to hear from you.
Everybody's going to go at once. Well, we can. I can go on a little bit more about, you know, time management stuff, or a little bit more about you know, some of these ideas and strategies. But I'd like to hear more about what you guys are thinking.
Good afternoon.
Hi, how you doing?
Okay. Can you send an email with those links for the resources instead of just showing them on the screen?
Yeah, absolutely. What I can do is I'll send those to Kate and Caitlin, and then they can hopefully pass those along so that you guys can actually have the links to that information.
Hi, Dr. Ballister. It's Kate and Caitlin. We like to archive all of these programs, and we will resource all of these listed books, apps, articles. So you'll get all of this information, as well as put into our weekly e-newsletter.
Good. Now, I have a little complaint. Okay. I would suggest that you avoid the metaphysical, philosophical considerations of time. We're not talking about time, space, continuum, and all those things. Sure. Okay. All of us here, okay, have managed to accomplish something by managing the time that we had. Okay. The best point that you're making is being mindful of what you're doing. Mm-hmm. Okay. Like in the first video, you cannot control if your basement floods, okay? But you have to take care of it before anything else. You don't want to get things out of hand, okay? Mm-hmm. The same thing happens with, you know, when I have a patient that suddenly, oh, I have a chest pain. Well, okay, I have to get an EKG or refer the patient to the emergency room, okay? And that's, I didn't plan for it, okay? I just have to be aware of the situation and follow my training to make the next decision, okay?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I appreciate that kind of. You're right. Part of this too is kind of this kind of just, you know, conceptual idea of like time, and you know, maybe not specific on the idea of like certain strategies of you know, that are specific. But that was part of why the calendar part was trying to give a little bit of a strategy. But you're right. I mean, that's how we all know how to do some of this stuff. But one of the things I think the reason why this kind of wellness program is there is that we're obviously experiencing in the physician world an extremely large amount of stress and burnout, and these wellness issues have kind of come up. And so I think we're just kind of reinforcing and re-exploring some of these things that some people are doing very successfully already and kind of know how to kind of get in there. Sometimes I think it's just kind of like that reinforcement, but I think some people also have lost track of that, and it's kind of like getting them to refocus on something that maybe they haven't been thinking about for a while. And then they've been considering things like, I don't want to do this anymore because I can't manage it, and maybe some ways to kind of maybe regroup and get back into something that they may have lost the love for. I think that was one of the things that Kate and Caitlin talked when they introduced this thing is like, you know, this idea is to reignite the passion for the love of family practice. And the idea is some people have struggled and lost that, but not everybody. I think some people, one of the things I've learned about is a lot of people that are doing all the wellness kind of stuff they hope to do, they come to this kind of stuff and they hear stuff and they reinforce what they know already. People that are struggling tend to be the ones that tend to maybe not always kind of seek out stuff. They get in that kind of isolative mode, you know.
I have a couple of comments and questions.
Mm-hmm.
This is Patty Kellner in Cleveland. I wondered how much success you've had with doctors who are struggling with all of this. I've been trying to work on it and don't feel like I'm making any progress. You know, I've got somebody counseling me. I've got, you know, I'm aware of all this, but still, you know, there's the work. I feel like if I had, you know, I do delegate. I delegate to 2.5 people every week, but I could delegate to more if I had more resources. I know Randy Wexler's at the State House testifying that we do need the CPCP or whatever it's called, the initiative, to have a fleshed out a practice. And I appreciate that, but my hospital's not anywhere near there yet. I wonder first about, you know, how much success you see in people tackling this. And my other comment is, I think I'm going to put your slides up on my door, on the mirror in my bathroom. And I think I need to do, you know, some weeks of the calendar to see where my time is going. So I really appreciate your talk, and I'm probably going to use my staff to help hold me accountable on some of this, because they are really invested in me being quicker, get out of the office, don't let the patients run over me. So I'm going to try it. But I wonder, you know, how successful are people? Because like I said, I'm just not making headway.
Sure. No, and I appreciate that. I think, and I appreciate your honesty and, since, you know, and sharing that kind of vulnerable information. I think that you're right. We are in this kind of situation where you kind of brought up a good point. We are sometimes being asked for things that aren't probably reasonable, you know, or getting overwhelmed and over demanded by stuff that we just, it's not fair to kind of be put on. And some of the problem is the system, you know, some things, and that some of that stuff needs to change. I think your question is how many people get better from this. I think one of the things I always have to measure when I ask myself is, what are we trying to measure with progress? And to me, I don't know what your scenario is. I don't know what you're experiencing with your counselor. But I got to imagine, just by taking some of the steps that you've kind of addressed and things you're doing, and your willingness to be here and your willingness to take, I would assume that it's progress from where you were at previously when you entered into the situation. So while they may not be the ultimate goal of what I hope it to look like, it sounds like there's been some movement into addressing some of this stuff. I think you make a good point. There is some of it you can only go so far with it, and if the other parts, like the hospital and stuff like that, don't make those changes and don't recognize that too, there is a limitation how far I can take that, you know. But I think that's the thing of when we look at victory for wellness is, am I making some progress at least on the things that I've been trying to go, you know, move forward? And even while it's not perfect, I've seen some steps. I mean, I have to just imagine you've made some steps forward, and you're you're letting your staff aware that kind of help you say, to me, that must be moving forward steps. And so like I said, I don't know your whole story, but it sounds like that has progress in itself. Is it the ultimate goal? Maybe not. But again, I always had a couple of my presentations, I'd use the Bill Murray, what about Bob slide, where it's just baby steps, you know, baby steps into wellness, you know, and again, I completely agree. There's some systematic things that need to be changed. And that's something like I mean, I deal with that with the impairment issues when we talk about physicians and some of the rules that are in place about impairment issues and how they're treated. Like we have rules and systems in place that are counterproductive from actually allowing people to ask for help because they will get in trouble for being human and having issues. And so we were trying to find ways systematically, how do we change that? Because we can do all the help here, but if this still exists, we're only going to get so far. So I do agree. I do agree with that. But I would just reward myself into what you see. I mean, I have to give kudos just to being here and asking that question, you know?
Yeah.
One of the things, this is John Boltrey. So one of the things that I started doing was every week in the clinic is I try to create one new something to help me be faster. So for example, it might be, I don't know what electronic health record you use.
Allscripts. Yeah.
I use Epic, which isn't great. And so each week I try to create one new template, like it might be review of systems for diabetes or review of systems for follow-up for diabetes and hypertension. So each week I try to create one new one. Now I've got a whole bunch, so then I can just click on that, and that these are the typical things I would ask a patient. So, and then the last week, if I have a patient no-show, and I know that, I'll spend more time in the room. But occasionally they'll add a patient in without me knowing, and you're supposed to check the computer, and it somehow signals you with a white dot or a green dot that there's a patient ready or patient waiting. So I've asked my assistants to, you know, if something happens that's not on the schedule, because we do a little huddle at the beginning, go ahead and notify me, send me a text or some other way, notify me so that I don't wind up spending an extra 10 or 15 minutes in a room with the next patient when I know there's a patient waiting. Those are just a few little things. I wanted to comment, I really enjoyed the presentation. You know, there's nothing new here. I think over the years we've heard it before, but it was really nice to be reminded of setting priorities. And what happens a lot to me is I have a lot of competing priorities. So the easiest thing to do is to just not set priorities and let the day roll out as it does. But then at the end of the day, you're like, boy, I wish I had done this instead of that. So if you just take a few minutes at the beginning of the day and say, these are the really important things that I want to make sure I get done today. That was a nice to hear. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And I appreciate this discussion. I hope that the idea, and hopefully as we move forward to this, I think it's valuable that you guys kind of chime in and share with each other your tips and strategies towards some of this stuff, because you guys are the ones living it, especially in that physician role. You know, I'm a therapist. I can say all the nice therapy things and remind those, you know, bring up those philosophical things to talk about, but it's really you guys that are actually putting it to practice and seeing how it works and what doesn't work. So I appreciate that.